Hey everyone, Pour More coming at you with another interview series. Today we will be meeting with Chicken Cock Whiskey. We are getting them in right now, so just give us a minute. We've got Will from Chicken Cock joining us. Will, are you in the chat?
All right.
There we
Yeah.
go.
Awesome.
Will, how you doing today,
I'm
man?
good. How's it going, Greg? It's good to see you.
Doing good. We got. Oh, there you go. Can you see me now? There we
Yep.
go.
Yep.
How's where are you today?
I'm based out of Detroit, Metro Detroit. So yeah, it's a nice, cold, gloomy day up here, and you're down in sunny old Georgia,
Yep,
right?
St. Georgia. Although yeah, so you have a beautiful background back there. How many guitars do you have
Oh,
back there?
thank you. I've got two electrics right here, and then I've got an acoustic situated over there. A couple others that are hidden away, but
Nice. I like those are beautiful guitars back there,
yeah.
man. What's the red one?
The red one's a Gretsch Streamliner, so it's a semi-hollow body guitar, and the one right next to it's a Fender Strat.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on today. We have some folks joining in. Ask questions throughout if people have questions for Chicken Cock. In the meantime, so Pour More Liquor of the Month Club. We're doing whiskey, bourbon, scotch, tequila, mezcal, rum. Every month we send out full bottles of liquor to our subscribers. And this month, or last month maybe, we sent out Chicken Cock small batch whiskey to some of our bourbon subscribers. And so I reached out. Will and I had a conversation. I was like, Will, we got to talk about Chicken Cock. Can we do this call? And so here we are. So Will, welcome today. The first question I'd start off with, I want to jump in. I know that Chicken Cock is an older brand, right? It's been around for 150, 160 years.
Yeah. It's something that we obviously love to talk about is that deep history. And yeah, Chicken Cock whiskey has been around since 1856.
Yeah.
So coming up on a 170-year-old brand here.
Yeah. So I know this started and then it kind of went away. Talk to us about the revival. So talk to us about where it came from and why the brand came back. What was the inspiration there? Who sat around going, you know what we need to do? Let's bring back that brand. Walk us through that.
Yeah. So the reason why we're having to kind of reintroduce or introduce the brand to so many consumers of so many different generations out there is because Chicken Cock wasn't around for so long. The brand's initial inception started with a man named James A. Miller. He was a farmer down in Paris, Kentucky. Started distilling whiskey on his farm in the 1840s and got enough acclaim and got enough capital from farming and his distilling to open up the Chicken Cock Distillery in 1856 in Paris, Kentucky, which is the seat of Bourbon County. So you can
Yeah.
imagine the focal point that this place was during early bourbon history. And the brand was around for a long time. Throughout the 1800s, they became the first brand within Bourbon County to ship their whiskey internationally.
Wow.
They were taking their spent grains after they would distill, and they would dry them out using the state-of-the-art machine, and they would ship those grains over to Europe. They were doing a lot of really cool things. But a lot of the number one question that we get is where does the name come from? Kind of ties into this history portion, right? You got to think about how old this brand was and sort of the English language that had developed around that time. The term rooster wasn't really popularized until the later half of the 1800s. So back then, James A. Miller just simply named this brand after one of his most prized possessions, which were his roosters. Back then, the term for a rooster was a chicken cock. So you got to think about the fact that there was the Peacock Distillery right down the street. The old Crow Distillery had opened up around that time frame. You got brands like Kentucky Owl. There's a lot of people, places, or animals involved in those early
Animals,
brands.
yeah.
And we're a great example of that. So, fast forwarding though, when we can absolutely get into some of the more nitty gritty prohibition history and all that stuff, I'd love to talk about that. But basically, the brand got discontinued around 1950. And our parent company is called Grain and Barrel Spirits. And our founder's name is Madi. And Madi wanted to resurrect an old whiskey brand. And so he did a lot of early distillation research, looking into old brands, pre-prohibition brands, what brands were out there, what kind of history was out there, what brands were available to maybe be revived again. And he was at the Oscar Getz Museum in Bardstown, Kentucky. And he passed by this glass case, and it had this bottle of whiskey in there. And on the front label, it said chicken cock. And I don't care who you are, that stops you in your tracks, right? So he went
Yep.
home and did a ton more research, basically, the short history of it, but did a bunch of history, learned out that nobody owned the brand rights. It hadn't been produced since about 1950, and it just had such a great story to it, high quality reputation, lots of things to go off of. So this was the winning brand in his eyes. So we officially kicked that off around 2012, and
I love
started
that.
producing whiskey like what we're going to talk about today around 2017.
Okay. So the brand was revived. Is the recipe similar? Like how did he marry the old brand and product with the new brand product?
Yeah, great question. So, included in that history, we're finding actual relics, right? Old sealed bottles of chicken cock, and finding old newspaper ads, and doing all this great history that we now have at our disposal. One of the key things was, can we see if we can extract what the recipe was? Because unfortunately, what happened in the 1800s, James A. Miller started the brand. He passed away in 1860. A former clerk of his named George White took over the brand and championed the success that it had throughout the later half of the 19th century. But then it got sold off to the Whiskey Trust. And then it was produced in Canada for a brief amount of time. Then it was produced as a medicinal bourbon. There were massive catastrophic fires that took place at that Paris, Kentucky plant too. So finding the original recipe, unfortunately, was something we just never came across. It just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
I've heard a little bit of scuttlebutt that there are new technologies that may give us the capability to take old chicken cock whiskey from, I'm talking about 1800s era that we still have at our disposal, and extracting the DNA to find out what that recipe may be.
That's cool.
But the way that we went about doing it this go around was our master distiller wanted to create a mash bill, because we didn't have the exact specifications, that may have been indicative of the later half of the 19th century. So that would be a high rye recipe. So we use 70% corn, 21% rye, and 9% malted barley in our mash bill. So a high rye recipe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. So can we hear a little bit? I think your bottle is so distinctive and it's beautiful. It reminds me a little bit of chicken wire. Is that sort of the inspiration?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So if we go back in time again to Prohibition history. So after the crest of the 19th century, right, about 1900, the Whiskey Trust purchases chicken cock whiskey, and the Whiskey Trust is this large, huge conglomerate that had formed back in that day. Very affluent people who were trying to dominate the market, and so they acquired the chicken cock brand, and basically for about 1914, they stopped producing the whiskey in Paris, Kentucky. They started producing it at their larger Louisville plant, but the problem they ran into was the temperance movement was sweeping through America, which was the precursor to Prohibition.
Right.
Full-blown Prohibition hits America, and that takes out thousands of distilleries across the nation. Very few survived through that, and very few brands were able to be made during Prohibition. I think there were about 8 distilleries that got the okay from the government to produce medicinal bourbon. So American Medicinal Spirits Company is one of those brands. They produced chicken cock as a medicinal bourbon during Prohibition. But the other way that chicken cock was produced, there's a little bit of overlap here. There was a guy named Sam Brontman, and Sam Brontman basically started up an operation in Montreal, Canada called Distillers Corporation Limited. His sole intention was to make as much booze as he could with the full intention of smuggling it down south. So he was buddy-buddy
All right.
with guys like Al Capone and all those famous
Yeah.
smugglers, right? So he starts producing the chicken cock brand up in Montreal, Canada, and he's producing it as a pure Canadian rye, and he's bottling it inside the small pint bottle that's got chicken wire on the outside of it, and he's packaging that pint bottle inside of a tin can. Now, as a little treat here, I've got one of those original tin cans in an original bottle. So that's an original Prohibition era bottle. You can see where we got the influence from for
Yeah.
our bottle designs. And then this is the original tin can that it would come in. So it fits right in there.
That's
And there
really
would be
cool.
a key that you used to have to cut open the top with. But yeah, that's the tin can right there. It shows that original, distillery in Montreal where chicken cock was produced. That bottle right there, that rye, was showing up at a lot of cool places along the eastern seaboard. But one of the coolest places that we found out it showed up at was the Cotton Club in Harlem, New York. That's where all the famous jazz musicians of the heyday played.
Yeah.
Furthermore, when we looked at Duke Ellington's memoirs, he talks about playing at the Cotton Club during the 20s, and he mentions chicken cock by name. It was the house whiskey there. It was very good, and it was rumored to cost about $14 a pint. So that bottle of whiskey during Prohibition in today's money would have cost you 243
I was gonna
bucks.
say that's
It's
expensive.
expensive. It was an expensive whiskey. So really cool, rich history there. And then if you've ever seen our Double Oak release, if you've ever seen our Island Rooster, some of the beer barrel finishes, we've got a little bit different bottle design. I don't have one right next to me, but it's kind of got this Art Deco style glass, and
Yeah,
it's
I
got a
wanted to talk about
cap.
those.
Yeah, it's got a metal cap on top. That's exactly what chicken cock looked like when it was being made as that medicinal bourbon during Prohibition. And the metal cap on top was to be utilized for ease of use. That's how you measure your medicine. It's an ounce and a quarter. So
Right.
we
It's
we
like it's like Tylenol when it has the little cup on top for the kids.
exactly
Right.
NyQuil, Tylenol, whatever.
Yeah.
They have that cup there. It's for ease of use. That's how you took your medicine. So people might see that and think it's a party shot glass, right? Which you can definitely use it for that, but we're just we're playing into that long, rich history there, including our packaging. So
I want to talk about the other releases. I went through your portfolio. You guys had, for having you have the flagship product, right? The straight bourbon. You have the small batch, and then you've got this sort of like great lineup of other specialty. Can you talk a little bit about the inspiration behind those? Is it consumer driven? Is it distiller driven? Like tell me about that.
yeah, great questions. So yeah, we've got our sort of flagship core lineup, which would include, like you said, our Kentucky straight bourbon and rye whiskeys, which are both 90 proof. Then the small batch, which we're going to dive into today, which is another little step up. And then we kind of get into that double oak and our LTOs and our limited time offerings, that side of the spectrum. So what we really wanted to do as a brand is provide very, very, the boldest whiskeys possible, but provide something sort of for everybody. And not that we're necessarily always catering to trends or anything like that. Of course, that's always helpful, but usually got to hit them right at the right time, right?
Yeah.
If you start doing barrel finishes when they were popular a couple of years ago and everybody's done them, now we're not part of the trend. We're behind the trend, right? So we try to do things that are really, really innovative. So double oak is a great example of that, where that's got a really interesting story. Double oak is a very, very popular subcategory within the bourbon industry. And so we want to kind of capitalize on that. And so that whiskey spent the first 7 years in used barrels. And then we transfer it to brand new oak, let it age further at the top parts of the rick house. So it's a really interesting sort of production story behind that one. And then we've got, tin can releases like this Mizunara release that we just launched. This is our new LTO for 2024, and it's an outstanding whiskey. But Mizunara oak is a really rare species of oak that only grows in Japan. You typically have to wait 200 years before you can make it into a barrel, because it's got to get because the density is way different than a normal American oak tree would be. They're very hard to cooper barrels from. So that's an example of us taking a really rare, cool species of oak that grows in Japan and finishing our bourbon in it to provide, such a bold expression of chicken cock bourbon, something that's really unique, something that's really off the beaten path. That's kind of like the space that we like to play in. We don't like to do the conventional stuff, right? So though the LTOs, the Mizunara, our cognac finished barrel that we did, our Red Stave, which is a petite wine barrel release that we did, all very different, all amazing whiskeys, and again, each have their own sort of bold character to them. So
They've all got bold character. I'm curious, what would you say is what differentiates chicken cocks? Recipe, flavor, like what is the thread that pulls them together and differentiates you as, it's a crowded category. So how do you guys differentiate?
it is, first and foremost, we've got credentials from a historical standpoint.
Yeah.
This brand, it's not every day that you can sit here and talk about a brand that's this old that's still existing within the United States, right? So we've got that bold, rich history that gives us a credential there. One way in which we invoke the quality promise that chicken cock has had for such a long time is the oak selection and the barrel production process, right? Before whiskey even enters that barrel, you got to think about the oak first and foremost, because that's where 70% of your flavor is coming from, 100% of your color is coming from that.
Yeah.
And we put a lot of hard work and care into that process. We're hand selecting every log that gets made into a barrel that our whiskey rests in, which is something that goes way above and beyond, right?
Yeah.
A lot of places, a lot of producers will just go to some cooperage, say, give me a standard level 4 char, or the whiskey's already been aged for them. We have oversight from bark to barrel to bourbon to bottle. So we hand select all those logs. They're very heavily compacted with natural wood sugars and compounds that give our whiskey great flavor and quality. And then we're doing a medium plus toast to each of those barrels, which is going to caramelize all those natural wood sugars in that barrel. And then we're going to do a level 3 char. So again, even before whiskey enters that barrel, we're taking a lot of steps above and beyond what other distilleries modern day are doing. And then again, I call back to that high rye recipe. That's going to give you such a great bold sort of texture and flavor. It's going to give you nice sweetness, but also nice spice character to the bourbon. Same thing with our rye. Our rye is incredibly delicious. So, but a lot of that goes back to the barrel again because it's providing all that great flavor. So that's one great way, or another great way outside of our long, rich history that we can talk about that I think separates us from the pack.
I love that line. What was barn to barrel to bourbon to bottle?
From bark to barrel to bourbon to bottle. Yeah.
Bark to barrel to bourbon. I'm writing it down. I'm like, that's a good one. I'm remember that for later.
Yeah. So, we've got a great collaborative distillation program with Bardstown Bourbon Company. That's where all of our whiskeys distilled and maturated at. But that does not mean that we're just simply selecting barrels that we think taste good and saying, okay, these can be chicken cock barrels. Again, we've got that oversight all the way from the log selection all the way down to the distillation, fermentation, and then maturation.
Beautiful. So, all right. So we've talked about the line, talked about special. Let's talk about the small batch. So this is the bottle. This is the bottle that went out to all our subscribers.
Yeah.
And let's talk about it. So tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah. So our Kentucky Straight Bourbon right there. That's the blue label, right? That you got in your hand.
Yes, I had the blue label. That's right.
Okay. So yeah, that's our Kentucky Straight Bourbon whiskey. That's 90 proof. Man, it's such a delicious whiskey right there. It's our most popular, #1 bestseller, and for a good reason. Again, this was the first release that we did with the Chicken Cock brand was our bourbon whiskey right here. So again, it was the first time that bourbon had been made with the Chicken Cock label in such a long time, and we're so proud of every day of how this bourbon comes out, and we've won a lot of awards with it and all that good stuff. But so again, it uses that high rye recipe. So again, it's 70% corn, 21% rye, 9% malted barley, and then it was aged in those hand-selected American white oak barrels with a medium plus toast and level 3 char. What I love about our bourbon is it's got such great balance. A lot of people might prefer really high proof stuff these days with whiskey. A lot of people prefer the barrel proof stuff, and they forget about these great 90 proof, 95 proof, 100 proof bourbons that deliver so much amazing flavor, like ours. So I get a lot of orange zest, apricot, nice caramels and vanillas that come out, and it's got a nice dose of a Kentucky hug, where it's not going to give you that alcohol burn, but it's also not going to just be one note and fall off. It's got a nice long finish, that sort of rolling spice on the back of your palate that just makes for a great pour.
Yeah, no, I like it. It has the high rye. I love the high rye flavor because I can feel it. It always kind of like circles around. Like it goes up into my like nasal cavity when I drink that.
Oh, for sure.
Oh yeah.
I have to grab the bottle.
Yep.
Give me one sec.
Yeah, it's got a really nice balance. I definitely taste the fruit on it. I'm getting the vanilla and the caramel for sure. It dissipates quickly, but it's still coating. Like it's still very, very thick as it sits there. The Kentucky hug, right?
Yeah, for sure. All of our bourbon's non-chill filtered, so you get that nice viscosity, that nice oiliness that makes it stick around. And again, just as you sit there and sip it, just thinking about that wood selection process and just how much flavor we're able to extract and maximize within our bourbon flavor profile. I mean, again, this is great when you get up to small batch as well. That 100 proof bottle that we just released this year, it amps it up even more. But through the lineup, again, you're going to find such great, bold flavors within our bourbon whiskey right here that are just going to be a great crowd pleaser. Again, I share this bottle with anyone and everyone. It doesn't matter if you love high proof stuff, if you don't drink whiskey neat too often. I sample people on our bourbon across the country, from well-versed people who taste whiskeys constantly, day in, day out, all the way to people, again, that are a little bit more just getting into it. And again, it's a resounding, enjoyment.
Yeah, it punches higher, right? Like it doesn't. It's not light. It punches at that higher proof. So I like some of the higher proof stuff myself. It hits like a higher proof, right? I feel without having so much of the alcohol, like the ethanol, hit
Yep.
as well. But it hits high.
Yeah, we found that, it's all about finding that sweet spot. So again, we
Yeah.
got that 21% rye content in there that is kind of the star of the show after you take down the pour on the finish, because it's going to provide all those nice lingering flavors on the outside of your palate. Um, but yeah, just so well balanced, and I love how bold the finish is for being 90 proof. Again, usually a lot of people don't expect that until they get into that 100 proof or higher to provide that sort of rich character on the finish. And again, I love our 90 proof bourbon for that reason.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm getting a lot of like hard
Mhm.
candy, like hard like butterscotch, kind of
Yeah.
like that kind
Yes.
of note on
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, those are very, very common flavors within our bourbon. Again, I get that orange zest. I get butterscotchy is also another great one. The caramels and vanillas. That medium plus toast before we do the char, again, is helping us to create all those amazing flavors within that barrel that are going to shine through when you're tasting it. So it's just an outstanding pour.
So across the portfolio, you've got all these barrels, all these new teas. Which ones are becoming your favorite? If you're gonna sit down and have one of your bottles, which one's your favorite?
It's a great question. It kind of depends on what's going on, right? So one of my new favorites in a regular rotation, I would say, is our Kentucky Straight Bourbon. It is just phenomenal. I mean, you can sip this any day of the week. Sometimes I say daily sipper, and people are like, "Do you drink whiskey every day?" And I'm like, "Well, it's kind of my
Kind
job."
of your job, yeah.
But this is always just a beacon. Like, you can come to this anytime, any day. You can throw it in cocktails. You can sip it neat. You can do whatever you want with our Kentucky Straight Bourbon right here. Again, that small batch, I was super impressed with this because we came out with it earlier this year, and we created a true small batch bourbon. And what I mean by that is, if you go to the store today and you see some of the popular brands, you'll see them scattered across the nation in every store you go to, and they say small batch on it. Well, what's small about making it from 150 or
Right,
200 barrel?
right. There's no rule about small batch,
There's no
right?
rules about small batch, so that makes it a little bit tough. You can make it from 2 barrels, you can make it from 200 barrels. It doesn't really matter. And so we got back to what we thought was the true intention, right? Back in the early 1990s, small batch kind of became more of a household name or subcategory within whiskey. And so we got back to that intention. So on the front label here, you'll see you'll see which batch it is, which this is batch number 2 that I have in my hands. And then you're going to see the number of barrels that we put in that batch, which right here is just 7
Yep.
barrels. Okay. That is a true small batch whiskey. All right.
That's small.
Yeah. So we're pulling the barrels from typically the second and fifth floors of the rick house on this. So you're going to get varying dynamics in more baking spice and cinnamon and clove and all those kind of flavors. And then you have barrels that are on the lower floor that have more of the sweet, desserty, butterscotchy sort of characteristics. When you blend them together and you bottle it at 100 proof and it's 5 years old, it's outstanding, I got to say. Just a little bit more age, a little bit more proof, takes all these amazing flavors that you're finding in our Kentucky Straight Bourbon, cranking it up to 11. So small batch has been a great one. If you're asking me about, it's Christmas Eve and I'm sitting in front of the fireplace and it's a special occasion type deal, man, again, this new Mizunara release that we just did, the exotic wood spice that it brings, the sandalwood, the rich, deep flavors. It's such a unique pour, but it is so warming, and I can't wait to have a pour of this on Christmas Eve. One of my other favorite LTOs that we've done is our Chanticleer, which is our cognac finished bourbon. Anytime I'm in front of people and I give them a sample of that, I tell them, when I pour this, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to have anything on the TV. I don't want any phone calls, text messages, no emails. I just want to focus on the whiskey in my glass because it is that damn good. It is outstanding. So
That's
those
the
are a couple
the Chanticleer, right? Chanticleer.
Chanticleer, yeah, just like the cartoon
Okay.
rooster back in the day. Yeah, so it's got that French theme to it. Chanticleer is a French term for rooster, so that's why we did that.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, French cognac finish. But
French cognac.
yeah,
Yeah, we had a very spirited discussion about small batch definition with Aaron from Smoke Wagon. who had the same point of view. It's like small batch. I have lots of very big small batches, so it's good to hear other perspectives on the small batch discussion as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. We wanted to get back to that true intention because it goes back to sort of the art of blending, right? There's
Yeah,
an absolute art into blending whiskey. I don't care who you are. If you think it's not hard and you've never done it, trust me, it is. And to come out with an amazing product from some of the best, a finite amount of some of the best barrels within your inventory, there's a true art to that. And there's something really cool about it. And when you're just blending it from your normal everyday bourbon, right, and you're blending 150, 200 casks together,
yeah,
there's no art to that. That's just mass production, right? So every batch that we do, we limit it to like 12 barrels or less.
okay.
So you're going to get different flavor profiles too from each of these different batches, which is really
And
cool.
we did.
So,
It was a small batch that went out to our subscribers. So I confirmed the
oh,
small batch what went out. There was a small batch that went out to our subscribers. I don't know which batch it was,
okay.
but they definitely got whatever that special batch was that went out.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry about that
No,
confusion
no, all good.
for anybody that.
No, all good. I made sure that we had the right, but they got the small batch,
Yeah.
which is most important.
Yes, absolutely. So that's very exciting, though. Again, this has become one of my favorites, if not my favorite, within our flagship portfolio, including our 90 proof, our 100 proof, and then our rye. All are outstanding whiskeys. But if you're a big bourbon fan, and even if maybe you've tasted our 90 proof bourbon, if you enjoy our 90 proof, you have to try small batch here. And I'm excited for all those people who got this bottle to try it and let me know what they think. Again, it just cranks that viscosity up. It cranks the flavor profile up, the finish. Again, it's a marvel what you get from 10 proof
Yeah.
points higher and a little bit extra age.
So your small batch philosophy is really interesting to me. Can we dive into that a little deeper? I'm really curious. So is when you're going into that, is there a target you're looking to get out of like we're looking to achieve this, or is it are you letting the whiskey drive what batches should come together? Like I'm actually very interested in how with all the barrels you have, right? What is the permutation that goes into picking what goes into that very small batch?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Again, it's a very finite amount of barrels, like I talked about, that are going into each of these batches. So again, less than 12 barrels,
Yeah,
and so it's sort of similar to when we launch our single barrel program, right? We have to offer samples of single barrels that are going to meet the standard. We have to give the A-OK to say like, okay, if you're going to pick the single barrel, we feel okay putting our name on it and bottling it because it upholds
sure.
the flavor promise and the quality and all that stuff. It's the same thing that goes into our small batch release where there's dozens of barrels, right? And they're all sampled out, and our master distiller will go by and he'll taste through all these different barrels. Okay, this one has a lot of viscosity. This one has a lot of orange zest. All the flavor profiles, right? You start to learn what is and what is not
Yeah.
to that peak maturation where we're given the okay to bottle it or blend it. So yes, it's a rigorous process where our master distiller is going through all these dozens of barrels, identifying which ones have the best flavor characteristics to them and which ones are going to play off each other the best. And then again, it goes into a blending process of, okay, now we've got our barrels that we want. Let's blend them together with the correct proportions and see how it comes out. If it's too tannic, if it has too short a finish, if it's too alcohol forward, if it doesn't meet the criteria in which we say, okay, this meets the standard for us, we're going to start a whole new batch. So it is a rigorous process to choose all those barrels. But yeah, we're typically taking them from varying parts of the rickhouse by intention, because again, those lower floor barrels are going to be basically like if you turn your stove on the low heat, they're going to maturate at a slower pace.
Sure.
So typically they
Sure.
pull out some of those more rich, dirty forward flavors. A lot of old age whiskey typically is aged on those lower floors for that reason. Not to mention the fact that the higher up you age, the less product you're going to have in the end.
Right.
But those higher up barrels are going to get more of that sweltering Kentucky heat. So they have more of that oak influence, higher alcohol content, higher spice level, higher baking spice, higher cinnamon, those sort of flavor profiles. And when you blend those two together, it just makes for an outstanding product. So that's what the real true intention of small batch whiskey is all about.
So where is the honey spot in the rick house? Do you know where it is?
Greg, our master distiller would probably be a better answer for that because he's
Okay.
going through tasting all these different barrels. I would, maybe that'll be my job someday, or I would love to be able to get to do that one day. I have blended whiskey, but I've never gone through and selected from a multitude of barrels and
Okay.
everything like that. But I will say, typically, that fifth floor, that sort of center
Okay.
cut of the rick house, because you get nice heat in the summer, but you get those nice cool temperatures in the winter too. And so you just get a nice balance of heat fluctuation going throughout those. And again, a lot of fifth floor barrels are going into these small batch releases. So
I love that. I love hearing people's sweet spots. Where is it around? Because every brick house is different. Every area, we talk to people from California, Nevada, Colorado, Kentucky, obviously, and everyone's got a different spot. So I'm very curious about how everyone's brick houses go.
yeah, and it all depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
How long are you going to be aging it in that spot for? What type of whiskey is it? It all depends. That's not to say that we would take a finished whiskey. We wouldn't take like the cognac barrel finish and place it in the same spot as we would our normal Kentucky straight bourbon,
Okay.
right? It's a much more delicate process going through that aging,
Does
where you're
that
not
go
going to.
higher or lower?
It would go lower.
Lower.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, just because that secondary cask, you don't want it to overpower or overshadow your base
I
bourbon.
hadn't
We
thought
bourbon a
about
lot
that.
of.
Okay.
Yeah, so the higher up you go, the more of that barrel influence you're going to get. So you keep those finished
Yeah.
whiskeys at a lower level for sure. But yeah, there's so many variables in creating whiskey. I love it. There's so much to
Yeah.
play with.
That's what I mean. That's what I've loved about learning about whiskey is all the variables. Where are you in the country, humidity levels, the heat change. We did a call with the team, Scotch team, over in Scotland, and theirs totally different, right? So the it's not just the ingredients go in, but the barreling and the temperature. There's so many variables to play with. It is pretty
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. It's so fun, man. Again, you can get into where you harvest your wood from, toasting levels, charring
Yeah.
levels, rickhouse placement, fermentation, yeast strain, grain recipe, just so much that you can play with to make a truly unique whiskey. And again, we're doing so much of that to maximize at each step of the process
Yeah.
what the end product's going to be. So that's why I believe our whiskey is of such great quality
Yeah.
and flavors because of all those variables that we pay attention to and where can we maximize flavor at each of those steps
Yeah.
along the way.
So Will, I have one question I ask everybody at the end, which is when you're not drinking chicken cock, you're not drinking your whiskey. What is your favorite thing to drink?
Oh man, uh, you know, I've gotten this question before, and I was hesitant to say another brand when I first started, but I won't because that's the great thing within the
It's
whiskey industry is
community.
that yeah, you may be a little bit cutthroat in the sales and the marketing and all that stuff, but when it comes down to it, everybody has an appreciation
Yeah.
for everybody's other
You
stuff,
give
and the way I got
credit where
into
it's
it,
due, man.
yeah, if you
Yeah. You got
if you
you
look
got a few
here,
bottles back there. So
that's about 200 or so different bottles in
okay.
there. Off to the side here, a little small cabinet with about another 40. So I've got quite a bit of whiskey at home. I've trained my palate. I've learned about a lot about different distilleries and all that stuff out there. For me, and our master distiller used to work for him, and so that's kind of how I pair this in and make it okay. But Russell's, man, Russell's Reserve is one of the more consistent things out there that I love. I love Jimmy and Eddie Russell and what those guys
Yeah.
bring in terms of heritage and the Wild Turkey Distillery. So, but Greg used to work for him. Greg used
Okay.
to be the managing director, and Jimmy and Eddie Russell were actually his employees. So I've talked quite a bit with
Wow.
Greg about Wild Turkey history and all that stuff. But again, I've got a lot that I go to, and
Yeah.
it's all about research and development, right, man? That's my job.
That's
So
right. That's right. It's all right off.
yeah. So,
Did you get a
but like
bottle
I
of the
said,
Russell 15?
I have not tried that one yet. No, I've got a 13 here at home that is just it's outstanding. I've got some Wild Turkey 12 here from Japan here. So I have a true admiration for those guys. I've got a true admiration for a lot of distillers out there and distilleries out there. So hopefully they say the same about us. And I just know that we're making some of the best whiskey out there right now. So.
Absolutely. Well, anything else you want to say about the brand or the product before we call it?
No, no. Like I said, if you weren't one of the lucky people that got this bottle already, definitely go out there and find small batch. Again, if you've tried our bourbon, if you haven't tried our bourbon, it doesn't matter. Give small batch a try here because it's outstanding. Any of our new LTOs, if you happen to see this gem out there, we only made 10 barrels of Mizunara, so it's going to be hard to find out there
Yeah.
in the market. But if you do come across it, it is an outstanding must-have pour for the holidays. But yeah, if you're as we were kind of chatting before we went live
Yeah.
here, but if you're down on the Bourbon Trail, we've got a brand new home base and tasting room called Circa 1856, situated in downtown Bardstown, Kentucky. So if you're going down to visit any of those distilleries, please make sure you stop by, get a flight of our whiskey, buy some merchandise, hang out. We've got some cool holiday events going on as well in Bardstown. So subscribe to our newsletter at chickencock.whiskey.com to find out more updates about that. Follow along here at Chicken Cock Whiskey on our Instagram, TikTok, Twitter or X, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, we look forward to getting some liquid to lips here and getting people trying our new small batch bourbon and many other releases. So, Greg, thank you so
Thank you.
much for having me on today. Absolute pleasure. Would love to do this again at some point.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Will. Thanks everyone for joining. Everyone check out Pour More. Check out Chicken Cock in particular. Look for it in your local stores or subscribe to Pour More and maybe we'll get some more Chicken Cock bottles out there.
Sounds
All right.
great. Thanks,
Thanks
Greg.
everybody. Bye.